I don't remember the first time I loved her, but I remember the feeling of losing her, and somehow, that came before everything else. The town did not appear on most maps, not because it wasn't important, but because it had never tried to be. It rested quietly between a lake and a forest, as though it had chosen stillness over time itself. The roads curved gently, never in a hurry to reach anywhere. Houses stood close enough to know each other, but far enough to keep their secrets. Their wooden frames carried the weight of seasons, rain-darkened edges, sun-faded paint, windows that glowed softly at dusk, like memories refusing to fade. At the edge of the town lay the lake. It was too still, not peaceful, not entirely. Just still in a way that made you feel like if you stared long enough, it might begin to remember something you had forgotten. Behind it stretched the forest, tall, watchful, and dense. The kind of place where the wind did not simply pass through, but whispered, where paths existed, but never insisted on being followed. Theo had lived there long enough to stop asking why. His house stood slightly apart from the others, on a gentle rise where the trees thinned just enough to let the morning light reach it. It was not small. It was the kind of house built to last, high ceilings, tall windows, and a quiet dignity that suggested it had once belonged to someone who cared deeply about details. Inside, the air always carried a faint scent of wood polish and something older, like paper that had been kept too long. A piano stood near the window, not decorative, used. Its surface bore the subtle marks of time, its keys slightly worn where fingers had returned again and again. Sometimes, in the evenings, Theo would sit before it, not to perform, not even to practice, but to press a few notes, slowly, as if trying to remember a melody he had never fully learned. Above the fireplace was a mantelpiece, sparse, a few books, a small clock that ticked louder than necessary, and a framed photograph turned slightly away from view, as though even it preferred not to be looked at too directly. Theo never explained it, and no one ever asked. He was a quiet man in his early 30s, not the kind people immediately noticed, but the kind they remembered later. His hair was dark brown, always just a little too long, falling into his eyes when he forgot to push it back. Those eyes, gray with a hint of green, changed with the light, sometimes sharp and observant, sometimes distant, as if focused on something far beyond what was in front of him. There was a steadiness to him, not cold, not distant, just measured. Like someone who had learned slowly that not everything needed to be said out loud. He worked as a forest ranger. Most days he walked the same trails, checking markers, clearing branches, watching for signs that didn't belong, broken paths, unfamiliar footprints, disturbances that spoke of something out of place. But more than that, he listened, to the wind shifting through the trees, to the quiet that followed after, to the subtle difference between silence and absence. There was a part of the forest he avoided, not out of fear, just a quiet instinct. As if stepping there would mean stepping into something unfinished. The diner in town was small, but always warm. A bell above the door rang too sharply whenever someone entered, breaking the low hum of conversation that never quite rose above a murmur. The smell of butter and coffee lingered constantly, settling into the walls, into the air, into memory. Theo always sat at the same corner table, and Rosie always brought his order before he asked. Eggs, slightly overdone, toast thick enough to hold its warmth, a small jar of homemade berry jam, coffee strong enough to wake him, but not bitter enough to make him rush it. "You've been out early," she said one morning, placing the plate in front of him. Her voice was soft, but carried a quiet sharpness, the kind that noticed more than it revealed. Theo gave a small nod. Couldn't sleep. The rain began that evening. At first it touched the ground lightly, as if asking permission. Then it settled in, steady and patient, wrapping the forest in a sound that made everything else feel distant. Theo had gone out to check a fallen tree near the far edge of his usual route. That was when he saw it, the structure, half collapsed, forgotten. It might have been a house once, or something close to it. Time had taken most of its shape, leaving behind only fragments, wood worn thin, edges softened, purpose unclear. He almost walked past it. Almost. Something, he could not say what, made him stop. Inside, the air was heavier, still. Among the debris, half buried beneath dust and splintered wood, was a small metal box. Rust had begun to claim it, but it held. He hesitated before opening it, not out of fear, out of something quieter. Inside were letters, dozens of them, tied together with a faded strip of cloth that had once been white. They did not belong there, or perhaps they had always belonged there, and he had only just arrived too late to understand why. Back home, the rain traced soft, steady lines down the windows. Theo sat by the piano, the letters resting on the table beside him. For a long time, he did not touch them. And then, slowly, he untied the cloth. The paper was fragile, careful, deliberate. He unfolded the first letter.
If this reaches you, then I suppose time has been kinder to paper than it was to us. I don't know if you'll remember the lake the way I do, or if you'll remember me at all, but I remember you in ways that don't fade, even when everything else does. You used to look at me like the world had finally made sense, and I was foolish enough to believe it had.
Theo lowered the letter slightly. The room felt quieter than before, as though something had shifted, not outside, but within. That night he dreamed, not clearly, not in full, just fragments. A woman by the lake, wind catching strands of her hair, a laugh he could almost hear, but not quite, a hand in his, slipping away. He woke before morning. The rain had stopped, but the feeling hadn't. Days passed. He read more letters. Each one felt closer, more personal, more impossible to ignore.
They say the war will end soon, but they don't say what will be left of us when it does.
Theo found himself returning to the lake, standing in places that felt familiar, even when they shouldn't have. One morning, the mist was thicker than usual. It hovered low over the water, softening everything it touched, blurring the line between what was near and what was far. Theo stood at the edge, still, listening. Footsteps behind him. He turned, and there she was. Her hair was dark, moving slightly with the breeze, as though it refused to stay entirely still. Her eyes, deep brown, touched with gold where the light found them, held a quiet kind of curiosity. She looked at him the way one looks at something familiar, without knowing why. Neither of them spoke, not at first. And in that silence, something unspoken passed between them. Not recognition, not memory, something older. Theo felt it before he understood it. To be continued.